Hello, welcome to Bodhicaryavatara, chapter 7, verse 30. I will read it out to you first without the text on the screen and then with it. Here we go. Evam sukhat sukhang gachan govishidet sachetana bodhichittaratam prapya sarvakeda shramapaham. Now with the text up and share screen. Evam sukhat sukhang gachan govishidet sachetana bodhichitta ratam prapya sarvakeda shramapaham. Evam just means thus, in this way. And we know that word from many of the suttas begin in Pali. Evam maya suttam, thus by me heard, usually translated as thus have I heard. And in Sanskrit, evam maya shrutam. The Pali evam maya suttam, Sanskrit evam maya shrutam. So thus, in that way, gachan, present participle of gacchati from gam, so just going in that way, proceeding in that way. Sukhat sukham, sukhat ablative, sukham accusative. So gachan, going, we'd say exactly, almost exactly, yeah, pretty much exactly the same word in English, from happiness to happiness. So sukhat, ablative, from happiness, sukham, happiness, and that of course is the accusative of motion, going to happiness, sukham gachan. Ko vishidet sachetana. So a sachetana is a person with, we have chetana from the root chit, as in chitta, bodhichitta, it's the thinking faculty. Thinking and perceiving, chitta, chetati. Chetana is just your consciousness, also the discursive consciousness, having the ability to think. So if you're satchetana, if you're a person with chetana, satchetana, you just you've got your thinking ability intact. You're able to think in the normal way, is how I interpret satchetana here. Note with the, did I do a note on it? Yes, chetana is a feminine noun ending in long a. Chit, chetana, vipassana, vipashyana, lots of these verbal nouns ending in ana. But when this rule applies across the board, when you get a feminine noun in long a being the final member of an adjectival compound, it ceases to be a feminine a declension noun, and it becomes just an ordinary adjective ending in a. So sa plus noun chetana is sachetana. That makes an adjective. Now that declines like any other adjective in a. So sa means accompanied by, possessed of. So sachetana, and its antonym, the opposite, is achetana. Somebody whose cognitive faculties, or who does not have his cognitive faculties. So we can put what thinking person. Now, ko is who. Now, actually, I'm going to change this to without sandhi. Ka. Okay. So ka before a v, before the voiced consonant becomes ko vishidet. But now in this box I'm giving it with the sandhi resolve, that is sandhi not applied, so you can see each word individually. Ka sachetana. Ko usually means who, but it can also, as like an interrogative adjective, it means what thinking person. So what thinking person could despair, vishidet. Ka sachetana vishidet. What thinking person could despair? Vishidet, vishada, despair. It's from the root sad, and the present is slightly irregular because the short a changes to long e, sidati. And it's exactly cognate, etymologically cognate with our word to sit. So vishad, with the prefix vi before a s in the same word, because the preceding e, the s becomes a sh. So vishidati, literally to sit apart. The idea is collapsing and falling apart. And the word means, often translated as despair. It's it imports the notion of just falling to pieces, flying apart, just unable to do what you need to do, losing your powers. So vishidati. So ka vishidet sachetana, or ko sachetano vishidet. What thinking person could despair? Vishidet, the indicative, present indicative, he despairs, is vishidati. This is the optative, which means might despair, could despair. It's not making a statement, but it's just expressing the possibility. What thinking person could despair? Bodhichitratam prapya sarvakeda shramapaham. So what thinking person could despair? Prapya, meaning having obtained. It's this very common root. Let me call up now the iPad. Here we are. The very common root ap, meaning to obtain. In the meaning of to obtain, it is most often used with the prefix pra, which doesn't really affect the meaning. So pra ap becomes prap. And the rule now, I hope you all know, that when you make an absolutive from a verb that has a prefix, you can't use twa, you just use the suffix ya. And so it becomes prapya, having obtained. Having obtained, it has a slightly wider meaning than that, and that's a wider meaning we have here. So it also means to get on. In an earlier verse in this chapter, I think it was, you navam prapya, having literally obtained the boat, having boarded the boat, having got a place on that boat. And here it just doesn't, ratam prapya, ratam, the carriage, the chariot, not having obtained a chariot, but the idea is having mounted the chariot. So remember, when this verb prap is used with a means of conveyance, a nau, a ship, or rata, chariot, it often means getting on it, boarding it. So, having boarded prapya, the bodhichitratam, the bodhicitta chariot, having boarded the chariot of the awakening mind, sarvakeda shramapaham. Sarvakeda shramapaham is a compound adjective, the all weariness and distress taking away. How's it translated? That dispels all weariness / oppression and trouble. Is a compound adjective qualifying rata, the chariot. So having boarded this bodhicitta chariot, the all affliction, distress away taking chariot. In English, we'd tend to use that as we'd make a subordinate clause, a relative clause, the chariot which removes sarva, which the apaha, to remove, the sarva, all, kheda, weariness or oppression, shrama, trouble, apaha, remover. So which removes all weariness or oppression and trouble. Further to analyze this compound, if you go down to this apaha, we have the root ha, meaning to abandon. Also the idea is meaning to deprive as well as to abandon. It makes its past participle, both in Sanskrit and Pali, as hina. Let me give you the iPad. So, root ha, past participle, hina, and it's from that, and so hina literally means deprived, but then by extension it means inferior, lesser, something like that. And the term that many regard as derogatory of Hinayana comes from that. The yana from the root ya, meaning a conveyance. By the way, you know the verb e, the root e, to go. Well, ya is just, you might call, an alternative extended form derived from that root. So ya, to go, yana, a going, and therefore a means of going, a carriage or a vehicle, as in Mahayana, the great vehicle, the Hinayana, the lesser vehicle. Which incidentally many equate it mistakenly with the Theravada, but within Trungpa Rinpoche has written very well on this, that the Hinayana is nothing to do with the Theravada at all. It's even within the Tibetan tradition, for example. They'll talk about the Mahayana and the Hinayana simply relating to the attitude of spirit and attitude of mind of the person who does it. The distinction is being the Mahayana, who's the Bodhisattva, who will devote himself to the welfare of others and take the Bodhisattva vow, and the one who treads the Hinayana within the Tibetan tradition is the person who's doing the same practices, essentially, but without having made that vow. So, ha, to deprive or take away, and then apaha, the apa, away. Apaha is to take away. Now, as always, where you get, you can make an adjective ending in a verbal root. We had it in the first line. Sorry, in the previous verse, I should say. Shigra gah. Shigra gah. There, the gum of the root just changes to a gah, and that's slightly irregular. It's just it's a one-off. Here we have apaha, apaham. What's happened to the long ah? I'll tell you. Where you have a verbal root that ends in a long ah, sorry, oops, sorry. Where you have a root that ends in a long ah, but you want to use that as part of a compound adjective, you can do it, but the final ah will shorten to short ah, and it will then decline like any ordinary adjective in ah. For example, let's look at stha. Stha, to stand. A house stander, which means, of course, a householder. Griha, house. Grihastha, literally a house stander, somebody who has a house to live in. Householder. And now you see this final R, the root has changed to a short R. This, by the way, is of course a noun, not an adjective. When I said make compound adjectives that shortens to an R, well, it applies to any nominal noun or adjective. If it's an adjective, then of course it will decline now like any other adjective in R. But here, grihastha, which put in the nominative singular form, it now declines like any ordinary masculine noun in aha. And similarly, something apaha, that takes away, it now becomes an adjective ending in a short ah, like any other. So you've got this ratam, prapya ratam, the chariot, shramapaham, shrama, meaning trouble, exertion. So shrama, apaham becomes shramapaham. Now look here at this there, it's simply accusative, an ordinary accusative to agree with rata. So that's how you get the ratam shramapaham, the taker away of trouble. This now is expanded, sarva keda shramapaham, all weariness, trouble away taking. Sarva keda shrama apaham, all weariness, trouble away taking, that takes away all weariness and trouble. So I will now read this to you again with the text, and then finally without the text. Evam sukhat sukham gachan ko vishidet sachetana bodhichitaratam prapya sarvakeda shramapaham. And now without text. Evam sukhat sukham gachan ko vishidet sachetana bodhichitaratam prapya sarvakeda shramapaham. And that's it for verse 30.